Welcome to the November webinar, Fostering a Psychologically Safe Environment. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michelle MacArthur Morgan, and I'm the founding partner and creator of the Jigsaw Discovery Tool. My kind of background for the last 20 some years now has been working with organisations in learning development and focusing mainly on human behaviour and increasing self-awareness and just helping people to look at forming new, more helpful habits, new ways of working, new ways of being, and just applying some of the kind of the latest psychology and more latterly, since 2008, some of the latest brain research, neuroscience. So that's just a very little bit about me. Of human connection shows that trust and effective teamwork require team members to feel psychologically safe in the work environment. Now, some of you, I'm sure, have heard of the Project Aristotle, which was a 2-year team performance research study carried out at Google, which revealed that the highest performing teams have one thing in common, and that, of course, is psychological safety. Team members have the belief that they won't be punished if they make a mistake. They feel enabled to speak out, to be creative, and to take moderate risk without fear of retribution. Now, feeling safe reduces the stress of getting through the day, so that enables team members to show up as themselves and to be able to focus all their energy on performing at their best, instead of having to think about being careful about everything they say or do in fear of repercussion. Our agenda today, what we are going to be kind of discussing, the various areas we're going to be focusing on, is what psychological safety is and is not. How to tell if a team is psychologically safe or not. We'll look at some of the science of psychology. We'll be looking at creating psychological safe environments, and as part of that, building interpersonal trust. And then we'll finish off with a few practical tips, things that you could actually start and do this afternoon, straight away. Big passions, as many of you will know at Jigsaw, is to listen to what science tells us, which is not always what conventional wisdom would have us believe. And in our webinar today, we're going to be following that science, which is why we've broken the content down into 4 digestible chapters: psychological safety, the science, creating the psychological safety, and starting today. So our first chapter then, psychological safety, what it is and is not. Psychological safety is a phrase that most of us have heard or perhaps read about, but for many people, they don't actually fully understand exactly what it is. So to get us started, I'd just like to hear your thoughts about what you believe psychological safety is. So perhaps you could just type in chat a few of your thoughts. What does psychological safety mean to you? Yeah, getting some great kind of ideas there, being able to speak freely, not being judged, feeling comfortable, trying things out without any kind of fear of repercussions, being able to be myself, voice my opinions. Absolutely spot on there. So for some managers, there is an element of fear around psychological safety. There is a bit of a perception that in actual fact, what it means is they can't say no. They've got to keep their people happy by being agreeable all the time. But as you've just stated, psychological safety is not about being nice all the time, being frightened to say no. It's not about lowering the standards, letting things slip, or an invitation for team members to be able to whinge and whine all the time. It's about creating that environment of mutual respect, enabling, supporting people to utilise their personal strengths to speak out and perform at their best. Now, according to Professor Amy Edmondson, a world expert on psychological safety in the workplace. She defines it as a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. And Amy's research clearly demonstrates that organisations with higher levels of psychological safety perform better on almost any metric or KPI when compared to organisations that have a lower score. Psychological safety underpins everything we do in organisations. Now, in a recent survey carried out by the Neuro Leadership Institute, which looked at nearly 500 respondents, on average, people reported feeling just above 4 on the psychological safety scale, which goes from 1 to 7, where 1 is low, 7 is high. Now, although that you might say, well, that's not the lowest score, but it does illustrate there's still lots of room for improvement. And let's face it, only in the last couple of weeks, you know, you've only got to look at what happened with the Twitter saga and Elon Musk, for example. And it's not just in large organisations. Psychological safety is vital, no matter what size of organisation. So, what makes people feel safe to speak up? I'm going to ask this question of yourselves now. I want you to think about people that you feel comfortable with in speaking up, bringing up those difficult issues, giving that kind of challenging feedback when you've perhaps got a different opinion to somebody else. And what is it that puts you at ease? What is it about that individual that enables you to speak freely, to be yourself with them? Or alternatively, think of a situation where you felt comfortable raising issues and giving feedback. And again, think about, you know, what was that situation? What was it about it that made you feel safe to speak up? So again, we've already started to get the feedback in. Thank you, Sinead. Trust. What was it that actually helped you? Good listener, trust, know that the person won't judge you. Absolutely. Listen to, yeah, previous experience. Friendly, easy to talk to. Perfect. Feeling held. Thank you for that. 6 factors that have been shown to be important drivers of psychological safety. And I just want to briefly kind of go through those 6 factors at the moment. The first one being healthy relationships with leaders. So, you know, it's about leaders encouraging, being accessible and approachable, and explicitly inviting feedback, being open to communication. That great feedback that you gave me there, listening, leaders who listen to team members. Is design of job role. Do your job roles involve interdependence? Do they require team members to contribute and collaborate to achieve a greater goal? Do job roles encourage autonomy? Do you allow team members to shape their role and their work according to their strengths and talents? Are they allowed to show up as who they are? Is the role clear? Are there clear goals and responsibilities? The more yeses you can answer to that, the more likely people are to feel safe to speak out. Your organisational practices, are they actually supportive of psychological safety? Do they support people to do their best work through having clear processes, clear objectives? Do you promote diversity and inclusion? Do you promote active listening? Do you actually teach people how to be present and focused when somebody is speaking? Relationship networks. Do you have trusting relationships with colleagues? Do team members feel they can share their ideas with their colleagues and that they'll be taken seriously and listened to and not made fun of or put down in some way? opportunity for experimentation, to try out new ideas, to run pilots, especially if there's a high risk involved. The most successful teams and organisations actually have high failure rates in terms of the things that they try. If you think about, innovation, and that's something that we are all desperate for these days, innovation, it requires experimentation and making mistakes to find the best solution. Does your organisation encourage that? Do you encourage a growth mindset and view failures as a learning experience? And lastly, behaviour preferences. What about the dynamics of the team? Do they work? Do team members appreciate the talents and skills of individual team members and encourage individuals to use their best talents and skills? Do team members accept and appreciate differences within the team and value the diversity that individuals bring to the team? Are team members allowed to be themselves at work? Back to your previous kind of experiences and some of the answers that you gave me to what makes you feel safe and speak up. The majority of things that you've actually put on there fall into those 6 broad category of factors. Just, think about those 6 factors and your own organisation and how well are you at doing these things? How well have you got those 6 factors covered? I'm not going to ask you to share that, just a moment for personal kind of reflection. So now I'd like you to think about a moment when you held back from speaking up whilst at work. It needs to be a time when it would have been feasible for you to speak up. Might not have been 100% sure of what you wanted to say, but you just decided to stay quiet. Think about it, and again, just pop your thought in chat for me. Who gained by you staying quiet? Interesting, yeah. So we've got the other person, your manager, the poor behaviour continued, people causing the issues, the organiser, team meetings where no one said anything except the leader. Interesting. In actual fact, you gained. You gained by you staying quiet. There was an immediate gain for you by staying quiet, because for the time being, you were safe. You hadn't put your head above the parapet. You hadn't spoken out. But if you had have spoken out, who would have gained then? The bully in the room? In actual fact, when we speak out, the gain, it might not be an immediate gain. And you might have been left feeling in a vulnerable position. Your colleagues might have thought it was a dumb idea, or perhaps thinking that you were being critical. But the overall long-term gain would have been someone else, possibly the business, the organisation. Now, we're going to touch on this a little bit further when we kind of look at some of the science, but basically the human brain instinctively focuses on keeping you safe and will always be naturally motivated towards short-term gains. And that means that we are far more likely to be naturally drawn towards keeping quiet, because it's our brain's way, nature's way of keeping us safe. And yes, the gain is our own safety in the short term. But by holding back, the loss is the longer term gain of the organisation, the other party. I just want to kind of share a quick story with you. On the 1st of February 2003, some of you may recall this, the Columbia Space Shuttle had an absolutely catastrophic re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere, and all 7 astronauts aboard were killed. But, as was discovered later, it may have been prevented. Now, if we just go back to 2 weeks earlier, the day after a very successful launch, one of the engineers working on the project was called Rodney Roscher, and he was reviewing footage of the launch, and he thought that he noticed something. He thought that he actually saw a piece of insulating foam come off the external tank of the shuttle and hit the left wing on the space shuttle. But unfortunately, the video wasn't very clear. It was really quite grainy, and he couldn't be sure of what he had actually seen. And it was impossible to tell whether the foam had caused damage or not from the footage that he had. But he was actually concerned about it. He was worried about it. Now, in order to be sure of any damage, what he needed was some satellite photos, some satellite images. But to get the images, he'd need the higher management approval, the higher management of NASA, to put a request into the Defense Department. So Rodney emailed his boss to see if he could enlist their help to get authorization for these images. The response he got back was not very helpful. His manager turned round and told him to stop being chicken licking, which wasn't exactly complimentary or encouraging. A week later, in the formal mission management team meeting, Rodney was sitting on the periphery of the meeting when the possibility of the foam strike was briefly discussed. But Rodney sat there and said nothing. A formal investigation later concluded that the accident had been caused by a piece of foam hitting the wing of the shuttle, resulting in a large hole. The investigation also revealed that it may have been possible to prevent the deaths of the astronauts, as 2, albeit difficult, rescue operations may have been possible. A news reporter spoke to Rodney and asked him why he hadn't spoken up in the meeting. His response was astounding and so revealing. He replied, "I just couldn't do it. I'm too low down in the organisation, and she," referring to his manager, "is way up here." And as he said, way up here, he held his hand up in the air and pointed high above his head. Is a subtle but crucial aspect of the psychology of speaking up at work. Rodney didn't say, "I chose not to speak up," or that "I felt it wasn't right to speak." He said he couldn't speak. "I just couldn't do it." Now, the experience of having something to say, but yet feeling literally unable to do so, is so true for many people and very common in organisational hierarchies. Meanwhile, though, managers and people perceived as being in that hierarchy who are in positions to listen and learn are often blind to the silencing effects of their presence. And that again is something that we'll speak about in a moment. So do you think some of your people may feel they can't speak out, that they just cannot do it? I know this may feel an uncomfortable question, and it's not my intention to make anybody feel uncomfortable, and I'm not asking you to give any feedback on this. Again, it's a reflective question. But sometimes we just have to take a long, hard look in the mirror and open ourselves up to how other people may perceive our actions and our behaviours. Taking a look now into chapter 2, and we're going to focus on a bit of the science. So psychological safety is present when employees feel they're part of an environment where challenge and conflict and mistakes are valued, and learning is looked at as a team activity. He's present in workplaces where individuals can take risks and experiment and fail without having that fear of repercussion. So looking at the things that we need to be aware of and our leaders should be aware of. First of all, the primary goal and driver of the human brain is to keep us safe. And we need to remember that our brains have evolved to be really good at sensing danger and helping us to avoid it. And that doesn't matter whether it's in the physical world, such as being chased down the street by a ferocious dog, or being ridiculed for a suggestion that you've just put forward in a team meeting. The human brain still picks up and perceives the danger. Constantly scanning the environment, processing millions, approximately 11 million pieces of information per second. And each piece of information is categorized as being a potential threat, something to avoid and move away from, or a potential reward, something which is enjoyable, of benefit to us, and therefore we're motivated to move closer to it. And when we sense a lack of safety, or even a perceived lack of safety, the brain's limbic circuit and amygdala collectively engage and take attention away from areas of the brain that we need to make those logical, thinking, cognitive decisions and problem solving. It takes our focus away from the work that we're doing. So instead of actually performing at our best, the opposite is true as we move away from a perceived threat. And that is exactly what your brain does every time you hold back and don't speak up. Behaviours, besides being held back, may we also see if an individual detects a perceived threat. What else might they not do? Any thoughts? Pop your answers in chat. What else might we not do besides not speaking up if there's a perceived threat in an organisation? What might your colleagues not do that you'd want them to do? Not fully engage, yeah, absolutely. They'd stop taking risks, stop experimenting, stop trying out new ideas, stop coming up with these new thoughts and ideas, withdraw from the session. Somebody said, absolutely, yeah. So we can see that we don't want this. Absolutely opposite is what we actually want from people. Now, a second piece of science to be aware of is that creating a psychologically safe environment is not just about the actions of the leader or any one individual. It's actually about a shared set of interactional behaviours focused upon common and aligned goals, which have been created by the group. So when groups of individuals share a sense of belonging or are part of an in-group, the reward network in our brain is activated. And as human beings, as social beings, we need to have that sense of belonging and fitting in, being part of the in-group. It leads to increased levels of neural synchrony and makes working together towards common goals much more likely. Now, again, if we sense that we don't belong to the group, if we don't feel safe within the group, if we're not within that kind of, it's not, the group isn't shared by everyone, what could be some of the consequences, do we think? Again, any ideas in chat? We feel isolated, and if we feel isolated, we feel threatened. disharmony, withdrawing, that they're unable to show up as their real selves because they're all the time having to attempt to be part of the group, because that's what we want as human beings. That's what our brain is striving for, to belong, to find a sense of belonging. So we'll actually follow the rest of the group. We'll conform with people. We'll stop being ourselves. We'll stop using our strengths. We'll stop speaking up. Surviving, not thriving. Yeah, I like that, Peter. Absolutely. Now, a key role in creating psychologically safe workplaces is what we call the local leadership. At all levels of an organisation, leaders have a huge influence on the perceived safety of their people. I recently attended a webinar where the guest was Sarah Bowen, Vice President of Global Diversity and Inclusion at Bowen. And Sarah was speaking about the importance of creating psychologically safe workplaces and of leaders being aware of how they can help or hurt the development of a safe environment. Now, one of the stories she shared was about a leader who was asking for feedback from some of the engineers and was getting nothing back. But he quickly realised that their silence was in fact a strong message in itself. So rather than just assume that, there's no feedback, there's nothing to say and move on, he took the time to engage. And in doing so, he learned that the engineers were experiencing extreme anxiety due to an unrealistic deadline that they'd been given. Now, taking the time to engage, to listen, to perspective take, to see things through the eyes of the engineer, the leader was able to support their needs. He was able to ask for more time and make sure that safety was prioritised over speed. Now, Sarah's story touches on the very nature of why we need to increase awareness in leaders, whether they're new to leading or well-established leaders. The perspectives of people in power and positions of power are different from those of team members. And the power hierarchy is one of the first pieces of information that our brain attends to. We're constantly scanning that environment. Where's the power lie within this group, within this room? Excuse me. Imagine if more leaders had an awareness of this and understood how their actions and behaviours make a team member's experience either positive or negative. Or in other words, if they just give more thought to their behaviour and how they could actually support team members to feel safe, to speak up and take risks. Third chapter, we're going to be focusing on psychological safety and how we can create it. But before we take some time to look at some of the things that we can do, I want to start by being clear as to what behaviours we might expect to see in an environment where psychological safety is low. So what I'd like you to do is just type in chat your thoughts, what behaviours you might expect to see where psychological safety is low. Pop your answers in chat. Okay, so yeah, lack of participation, defensiveness, doing the bare minimum. Yeah, low morale, scapegoating, why bother attitudes. Absolutely. Motivation to be part is not there. Yeah. Share with you some of the common behaviours that we expect to see. An awful lot of those you have got there. So we know what the signs, and we see these signs time and time again showing up within teams, within organisations. So just want to take a moment now to remind ourselves of these 6 key factors we spoke about earlier. And 4 of the key factors are of particular interest to us at Jigsaw, because the behavioural framework, the Jigsaw behavioural framework, supports individuals and organisations to develop leadership abilities, enabling more agile and empathetic leadership approach, to build strong, healthy relationships where healthy conflict is encouraged and diversity is welcome and supported, which enables that increased level of collaboration and team working. To understand more about their own behavioural preferences and the behavioural preferences of others, helping them to understand the needs of others, helping them to enable individuals to show up as themselves and really use their talents and strengths to do some of their best work. Also, it can inform us around the design of job roles to allow individuals, again, to work using their strengths. And the more we know that more people that work using their strengths, the higher amount of time we spend working from our strengths, the increased likelihood of having higher levels of moments of insight, those aha moments, where performance is at its best. And we know that when working from those preferences, we're more likely to achieve that state of peak performance, or some people refer to it as flow state. Familiar with the Jigsaw Discovery Behavioural Framework, at its simplistic level, we focus on 4 key behavioural preferences. And when you complete your Jigsaw Discovery profile, you create your personal behavioural map, which illustrates your preferences in each of the 4 areas and highlights your flexibility to adapt and flex your behaviour to the situation. Having then completed your personal map, participants gain insight into the behavioural preferences of others and explore ways in which they can build stronger relationships, communicate and engage more effectively, understand how others perceive a situation, and develop that more agile and flexible behavioural approach. You'll see a few of the key behaviours of each of the Jigsaw behavioural preferences. We are all our own unique combination of the 4 preferences, but the majority of us have 1 or perhaps 2 preferences that are our go-to behaviours. Now, you could try just looking at each of those 4 pieces and putting them into your own order preference, selecting first of all the piece that is most like you, and then the piece that is least like you, and if possible, put the other 2 pieces in some kind of preference order. Now, that's a very rough and ready way of getting them pure. It's purely intended as nothing more than an illustration for the purposes of today. But it just gives you a bit of a feel for the framework and the 4 different behavioural preferences and how we're all that unique combination of each. Examples of how the Jigsaw framework can inform us and support the fostering of this psychological safe environment. As we heard in the Boeing story, the leader realised he had to find a way to engage and connect with engineers in order to get them to feel safe enough to speak up. So one of the things we talk about at Jigsaw is engaging people through their values and the things which are important for them. So for our action people, we speak about goals and solving problems and outcomes. Our creative people, we speak about concepts and visions and possibilities. For our caring people, we speak about collaboration, involvement, and we speak about people. And organised people, we speak about the how, the detail, the actual focusing on getting the job done. Far too often when we're interacting with people and trying to get their attention and engagement, we forget about their needs and preferences. We don't stop to view the situation from their perspective, and we go in head first, focusing on the things that we perceive to be important. Just to look at a few of the actions and behaviours we can use to support individuals to feel psychologically safe. So again, with our Action person, the red, inviting them to contribute at an early stage, delegating responsibility to them, perhaps giving them a lead and take lead on a project. With our creative preferences, listen to their many ideas, invite them to come up with solutions, encourage them to experiment and do trials and pilots, to seek out opportunities and to take risks. Green, the caring. Ask for their input, invite them to express their feelings, their concerns, demonstrate active listening and how you've given consideration to the people aspect of the situation. Invite them to discuss issues with their colleagues and provide a space for them to do that. And for our organised people, show your appreciation for their knowledge, get them involved in the detailed planning and implementation stages, and respect their need for privacy and time to work alone. Area I wanted to highlight today is communication, another very important factor and one that we get so wrong, as again we fail to acknowledge the communication styles of our audience, and we tend to communicate from our own preference in our own styles. So on the following slides, there are some key pointers about how to make a stronger, more effective connection and communication. But it goes even deeper, in so much as each of the behavioural preferences have specific words that they use. And when these words are used by others, they really resonate with them and get their message across. They get their message heard. And that's something that we talk about more in our communication module. Very quickly, show you some of the kind of communication preferences of the 4 different behavioural preferences, communication styles. So with action people, it's all about being clear, direct, to the point. Don't talk over them. Don't dwell on detail. Our creative people, then it's about allowing them time to go off topic. Yes, we might have to keep drawing them back to the topic. Provide options, not opinions. Don't leave decisions hanging. Don't you talk too much. Don't push and direct. Get them involved. The caring type, it's about being a more warm and social within our communication style. It's about using open questions, being patient, allowing them space to actually think and answer. Pushing into things with them. Don't be demanding. Don't tell and sell our ideas. Communicating with our organised, our blue people, it's about being accurate, sticking to the business, again, giving them time to respond, pause, do what you say you're going to do. Don't be frivolous, don't be ambiguous. Those are just a few of the kind of pointers that we should think about when we're communicating with other people, and try and focus more on presenting our message in their style as opposed to our own personal style. Actually get people talking then? Well, we have to create the environment by looking at each of those 6 factors and working on those factors, doing some of the things that I've just spoken about, thinking about people's preferences, matching preferences. And then we have to let people know that we really do want to hear their thoughts and ideas. We have to be explicit. We can't just assume that they will know that we want their ideas. We have to ask for their ideas. And when we're inviting participation, it's important to ask good questions, but it requires careful thought to focus on what is important, what really matters in this conversation. And then having those good questions, you need to provide the space for them to respond. Resist temptation to jump in and say something else. Silence can be really loud and frightening. Again, this is where having an increased understanding of self and others can be really helpful. Extroverts, for example, speak to think. So as soon as they've been asked a question, they immediately start speaking. The first things they say might not be the best ideas because they're developing their ideas as they continue to speak. So allow them to continue speaking. Introverts, on the other hand, think before speaking, which means that there might be a slight pause or silence before they begin speaking. Now, some people find that silence very difficult and feel obliged that they've got to step in and fill that space. To think about a time when that's perhaps happened to you. Has anybody actually stepped in to fill a space? They've asked you a question, and while you've just been thinking it through, they've actually stepped in. And how did that make you feel? Pop your idea in chat for me. Oh, yeah. Valued. Yeah, small, belittled. Absolutely. As the extrovert, good question. Yeah. Irrelevant. Totally. Yeah. So what we've got to do is to be able to distinguish between what we call problematic silence, when people are holding back or not asking a question, and productive silence, which allows people to think, to listen, and to contribute. The good questions, and again, you can see that some of the questions go broad and are much more suited to the action and creative, those intuitive preferences. And other questions go deep and are more focused on gaining the opinions of the caring and organised, more sensing people. I do want to point out here, what is the difference in meaning, if any, between asking the question, who has a different perspective, and does anyone have a different perspective? Any thoughts? Again, if you want to if you have got a thought, pop it in chat for me. Repeat the question. What's the difference in meaning between asking the question in a group, who has a different perspective, and does anyone have a different perspective? In those two questions. Difference in the way those questions will be perceived. Who is more pointed? Yeah. One assumes there's another perspective. Yeah. Who is saying one of you has something really valuable to contribute. I just don't know who. So who has, I don't know who it is, but I know somebody. I'm assuming that there are different perspectives in the room. Compared to, and a lot of it does, again, it's, is less heavy. Others, compared to does anyone have, could be interpreted, because it comes down to the tonality of voice as well, but it could be interpreted is anybody brave enough to have a different perspective? So who is actually saying, I know someone in this room has got a great idea. I just don't know who it is. Compared to, is anybody brave enough to slow me down? For thought, that subtle use of kind of language and how it can be interpreted. Obviously, as I say, a lot of it also comes down to context and tonality as well. Now, a basic human challenge that is hardwired into our mind is that when we feel we know the solution, it's difficult for us to learn. So we have to be able to recognize our blind spots and override them. We have to be curious and go out and invite participation. If you have got a problem, a challenge, but you think you've got a solution, but you know that the right thing to do is to ask for involvement, to ask the opinions of others. In that type of situation, it can be very difficult for us to really hear what other people are saying. So we have to be really curious, and we have to go out and invite that participation with an open mind. It's a bit like saying we have to go on a treasure hunt in search of the knowledge of others. Curiosity is a mindset and the habit that we can develop and have great knowledge. And we need to have that mindset. Yes, I have great knowledge, and I am missing something. And that will help us to override the hard wiring that we already know the answer. And that will help us to be more motivated to learn, to listen, to hear the opinions of others. The other thing we need to do is be mindful, be present in the present moment. And that again is really helpful when other people can see that you are 100% in the room with them there, listening, giving them their all. Now you might say, well, of course, we do that. But in actual fact, research has shown us 49% of our waking hours, we are not present in body and mind. Over half of the time, our mind isn't present where our body is. So are you truly listening? Are you truly in the room? So we need to be curious. We need to ask questions. We need to listen to the answers and the implications for what that means, for what you already know, what you already think the answer is. Don't be attached to the outcome. After gaining the knowledge of other people about your original thoughts and the outcomes, it may turn out that that's actually not the best one. Important skill that I'd just like to mention before we start to kind of wrap the session is what's referred to as framing the work. And the first step is to be explicit about the nature of the work. Highly automated process, such as an assembly line that's predictable. Is it complex or customized work where you have a lot of knowledge about the work that you're doing and what's involved, but there's a little bit of uncertainty and sometimes you have to work with the unknown? Or is it more creative work where you want to achieve something that you don't yet have the answer to and will need to try things out and experiment? The uncertainty level goes up as we move from the automated work to the creative work. Now, with each type of work, there is an associated human instinct, which has got to be overridden if people are going to speak up. And that human instinct is driven from our survival instinct, which is intended to keep us safe. So it's not an easy instinct to override. We really have to be aware of this and think about it and how we can actually help our people to override that instinct. Automated work, workers can become complacent. They don't have to think about it. So we have to find a way to try and override complacency if we want the work to be done well, consistently. For complex and customized work, the human instinct here is the desire to look good and to agree with the boss. Now, both of these are dangerous if they're not overridden, because we want people to speak up. And if all they want to do is just agree with the boss and look good, then they're not going to speak up. Creative work, the natural instinct here is to avoid failure. We'd all rather succeed at the end of the day, even though we are fully aware and we appreciate we need to fail in order to learn and grow and innovate. So I just want to share with you a couple of examples of how a couple of leaders have framed their messages to suit the needs of the business and the type of work that they do. He owns DMK, design agency, and he regularly says to his team, fail often to succeed sooner. His team know that they need to fail to succeed, but David also knows the power of human instinct, which if left unchecked, will keep driving the team to only do the safe stuff. And as designers, they obviously are very much in that business of innovation and creativity. So they need to fail in order to produce their best work. Example is from Toyota. And Jim Wiseman was a manager of a community relations, the first Toyota assembly plant in USA. And every Friday, he attended a senior staff meeting. And one Friday, he went into the meeting, he'd had rather a good week. And when he was giving his report, he was starting to brag a little about his achievements that week and the achievements of his team. And as he's giving his report, he looked across to the COO, Mr. Chow. And he noticed Mr. Chow had quite a puzzled look on his face. And at the end of Jim's report, Mr. Chow just looked at Jim and he said, Jim, we know you're a good manager, otherwise you wouldn't have got the job. But please talk to us about your problems. Now, the message Mr. Chow was framing there, that point he was trying to make, was all about teamwork. He was saying problems are a team sport. Success, you can handle that on your own. But use the brains around the table. Use the people around you, because it's always possible to do better. So finally, we come to Chapter 4, Start Today. So I'm going to leave you with a few questions and reflections to help you get started in fostering a psychologically safe environment. Now, I will actually send a copy of these questions here out in an email with the link to the recording next week. So a good starting point is to take the psychological safety test. Now there's plenty out there. You can find them yourself on the internet. This is just quite a straightforward, simple one. How safe do you feel? And you give yourself a score between 1 and 7 for each of the statements, and then divide it by 7 to find your average. It's also a good activity to ask your colleagues to do. It's a great way to get a general feel for the health of the current environment. So it helps you to think about, what would happen if I make a mistake? Would it be held against me? Do I find it difficult to ask other team members for help? Do I feel safe to take a risk? Are my unique skills and talents actually valued and utilised within the team? Broad areas of psychological safety: safe to be yourself, safe to speak up, and safe to take risks and make mistakes. And I'm going to give you 3 questions that you might like to take some time to reflect upon yourself. And these questions focus on what you can do to support and foster a psychologically safe environment. And I would definitely recommend discussing them then with your colleagues and team members, because as we said earlier, psychologically safe environments are created by groups, not individuals. 3 questions to kind of ask and reflect on. How do you make team members feel included in your team your organisation. So what do you do to make team members feel included? What do team members do to make other team members feel included? How do you encourage team members to speak up? How do you manage risks and mistakes at work? How do you respond to mistakes? And lastly, the questions and reflections on the previous slide were focused very much at that kind of organisational level. And I know that sometimes getting buy-in can be difficult. So in these circumstances, my recommendation is to start with you and then use your power hierarchy and influence to encourage the buy-in of others. Be the change that you want. The screen is just a few of the things that you could actually go away and do straight after lunch. What would you like to ask more about today? What's really important? Focus on something that matters. Note down a few good questions that you can go and ask other people today. What can you be curious about? And then convey that genuine interest in what other people might be thinking, experience. Find the treasure and make sure you give them the space to answer. As my grandmother used to say to me, don't put off until tomorrow what you can do today. So go away after the session. Start thinking about what questions can I ask today? What would I like to know more about today? And take action. The end of our session today, and thank you for joining us. If anybody's got any questions, I'm quite happy to answer them, or if you prefer to drop me an email afterwards, you can get in touch with me. My email's at the bottom of the screen. Just to also make you aware, on the 14th of December, we're doing a virtual showcase. Starts at 10 till 12:30. And in that, we'll be happy to answer, we'll be going through the jigsaw. You'll get an opportunity to build and create your own personal profile, your behavioural map, and learn more about yourself and the behavioural preferences of others. You can find the details of that, booking details, etc., on our website jigsawdiscoverytool.com. And at that, I'm going to stop the recording, and if anybody would like to ask any questions, please feel free to do so. Thank you.